Why we do what we do? That's been the question for many years. Early in my life, of course, I wasn't thinking like that. I was busy thinking of my own future this way or that way. And perhaps in the middle age, after I went to Stanford and business school, and before that engineering, and start to know how the society functions, I start to wonder such a question. There's something to do with the Zen, that was my interest, but also perhaps related to my visit to the US. From Japan, I have been to the US by the age 30, maybe 5 years or so. Not a long time. But if I reflect back, the first time I spent in Silicon Valley doing some nuclear-related work with Toshiba and GE. That was fascinating to know different style of management, but also different culture of two distinctly different countries. So after spending 2-3 years and 4 years and back in Japan for a while, I could tell that I could see the world more like a three-dimensional, or maybe two-dimensional, not just one way, but you can look at the other way too. The Japanese to look at the US, or US way of looking at Japan. There's a gap in between. So that's the nation-to-nation gap, but I see the same situation between people, me and you, or he, him, and us, whatever the case is. So it's one-to-one, or group-to-group, or nation-to-nation in different cities, or within the company. That also applies from one department to the other department. So everybody's got their view from their universe, so that's a mini universe, the mini company concept that later I came up with. So we live in small universe, knowing who are the customers, suppliers, what you want to do, and then connect to the flow of what the organization is doing, and connect to your people, while you may have your own life going on. So it's a fairly complex situation of how we navigate our life or do our work and see things from different angle. And more you can see things from different angle and consolidate or synthesize whole, you ought to have a broader view. Just like the case of a view from my experience in Japan to the US, and after that, moved to the US and then looking back to Japan. I still remember the first time I spent 1 year in the US, in Silicon Valley, San Jose area, and it was fascinating. And when I came back, and looking at my house and the road, it looked so tiny, the refrigerator and everything compared to the US situation. It's just a physical difference, but the people's view and how they look at the world is different. So that's also related to my curiosity to look at the world, explore the world, and I left Japan early in my life too, relatively early. I wish I could leave early, but took time. Leaving one country to live in the other country and looking back or relating to the new country that you live in, that's a fascinating experience. So it's kind of like instead of developing an ego, your own viewpoint, but you can look at the other person's viewpoint, the other country's viewpoint, all of that. So that helps in relation to how the people may work in the organization. And that was my major work from Stanford, and then to the management consulting and the private equity and all of that. Each situation is different. So like a business school, there are lots of case studies of you figuring out what to do given the case. So I think my life was going through many cases my way, and I'm sure everybody goes through the same. Maybe different in terms of the nation, or organization, or what level or what skill you have, but each has its own uniqueness. And then going through that process, you see a broader view of what's going on. It's kind of like playing the game. And if you play different roles, like a job rotation, you start to see a different view that helps your growth. You're not so self-centered. So if there's something I realized over these years relating to meditation and Zen, which is more into your own inside view, not just your mind view of the world. So that's a totally different, unique experience, going through the meditation, awakening, and what's the core of who you are. That's a totally unique dimension. So looking at the world, my life, other people's life, back and forth, up and down, sideways, horizontally or vertically, internal to external, all that dimensions. And then reflect back to ask the question, why we do what we do. So this is what I sense after moving from New Zealand, spending there for 2.5 years, and now back in Santa Monica. I'm with my ex-partner. I hope she'll let me stay for a while. We are good friends. I mean, that's another story, her view and my view and what is expected. My future is unknown, but the situation that I feel after moving from New Zealand to Santa Monica, and also meeting my ex-wife in Pacific Palisades, spending great time, again, reflection of her life, my life, what's different, similar, connect, and help each other, good friend. That's wonderful, as much as Martha, my ex-partner here, and we just came back from Costco. So let me talk about that experience too, because that's a unique experience for my own. Perhaps nobody can feel like it, but I was there. It's just a huge place and a well-managed company. I remember Charlie Munger talking about Costco, and it is the favorite as much as my favorite. And he and I agree that how company is well managed. Just looking around how things are done, it's just fascinating beyond word. And it's still the same, so it's one of the favorite places for me to go. And in the last 3 weeks, this is my second time, and I have more to say about it, but the point is that when things are flowing well, logistics, people, location, what to sell, how to sell, everything is flowing, so it's beautiful. So my work was related to develop those flow and the energy of the people connected. And the other experience, just for reference, is the Kaiser Permanente healthcare. So that is also a beautiful, wonderfully run company. Once I joined and went through the process, all the steps from my experience from the shop floor and also management and the logistics and the people, how they do it, forecast, and even to the customer service, and their response was very good. And the Charlie Munger happened to know Kaiser Permanente. But the funny thing is that this time, after 2.5 years, I went through the testing process and I noticed few bothering symptoms of the process in the internet, making appointment back and forth. I checked with one lady. Actually, this morning I was going there. I went there to do the lab test of the blood, but they didn't do the urine test, and that's funny. So there's something wrong. So I asked this lady at the entrance, how do you see Kaiser changing or not? And she was having the similar opinion in the sense that the software is not well managed, so making appointment takes 3 hours, 4 hours. So my intuition is proven, and I'm curious to process my complaint. If I do, I don't know if I do it, but 2 companies, Kaiser and Costco, well managed, and things may change, bureaucracy may take over, many money orientation. So the organization is alive, and what do they do and why. You have to have that angle to see, but to be able to see that has to have a sense of intuitive sense of looking at how the organization functions. So going back to the point, which was about why we do what we do, and then also experiencing life to go from one country to the other. Also this case of the New Zealand to the US. And I had a moment, what is my future? And I wasn't sure. So there was a video I posted. If you don't know, what do you do? That's a good question, right? And I think I have certain level of answer, which is wherever you are is home, obviously. I think I mentioned that in the other video. But still, you have to navigate, find a way where to go. And spending time for 3 weeks and reflecting back the time in New Zealand at my little house and the jumping into the water, catching a big fish and all that. And having gone through many processes in the life, it's like going through the Super Mario Brothers, but you remember the trick of it, and you can see the whole picture of it as you learn and master the skill how to navigate, plan to check, act, whatever, go to this country, that country, this business, that business, into Zen, and internally going into it, or externally exploring with friends and different relationship. And my son also, I found it very fascinating to find him to work in the very cutting edge of the technology related to, you can call it AI or whatever, the fascinating field. And we had a different view of the world when he was 17. All I can think of suggestion, advice to him was, just do whatever you really like to do, and if that helps the society, that's your job, that's your way. And we don't meet so much. Last time I met Kenji, my son, was like 6 years ago, and we don't talk. And my expectation is he's going to fail and, hopefully scratch or breaking the bone, but coming up, stand up and move on. And as I expected, in many ways, that's what he did. He went through the startup, or not doing any work, not even graduating college at the beginning, but he had some unique sense of looking at the world, maybe quite different from many others. So he figured out something and went through the startup, and then he's off to the next startup, and then another business idea, and raising money, and into another startup, cutting edge. And he showed me the idea and the prototype, super secret stuff, and what he wants to do. And he loves what he does. So happy to see, not seeing him comparing notes or anything for 6 years, but somewhat expected. He's got this unique view and unique idea and moving on his life. So as a father, that's the view of him. And for myself to look back about all the journeys and back and forth, different countries, living here and there and doing this business and that business, I think the mastery of human life or the life's journey is all that sort of like a game learning, PDCA, plan, do, check, act, and synthesize all of that. And even not the external issue, but internal to the depth of who we are. Like I was talking about the many books I've read. And they're like a unique country on its own for each. And there's a Picasso talking something, and Zen book about something else. And there's Konosuke Matsushita, who is a Panasonic founder. Wonderful book. And the Buddha's Word, and all of that. So I guess my resolution, and going back to my time in New Zealand and even before, and back to Santa Monica and where I am, not knowing the future, we can always find the foundation, the core of who we are, and then resolve, and the path into the future would open up. Future is unknown. And that's part of the game. And that's a part of the fun game. Of course, I may wake up in the middle of the night. Last night I had a few moments like that. But that's part of life. And we just need to settle when we are moving too much and look around. And when you need to, don't move too much and take your time. You have to find your passage, not given by someone else what you should do, but each of us has to find it. To me, that's a principle, and for that I may have been seen a little odd or quite odd to find my way, but I see my son doing it, and I think that's the self-managing process of what game you play. Super Mario Brothers, or AI, or startup, or some logistics business, or whatever the case may be, or you may go surfing or living in the wood. It doesn't matter. And at the end, what I feel, and I hope I keep this spirit all the way through, is up to us. We can always resolve it, no matter how difficult the situation may be. And that's the life's lesson, not to be taught, not as a knowledge, but experiential wisdom. And there's something at the core for us to see the game, how we went through our life. We may go back, that if that's the right thing to do, and then find another passage to move forward. It may not be easy. It may not be made easy. And there are lots of reference points, but they are not you. So each of us has to find it. And I call it the new hero's journey. It's not to be given by someone, but for us to find, no matter how difficult it is. And if it's easy, I would say that's very dangerous. Your life is not going to be like that. And you can feel complacent. I've seen lots of CEOs and not the CEO, but middle management, whoever. You know, we have to learn the lesson, not our own, but from others. And maybe I would say this. This morning I was thinking about Warren Buffett, another great investor who said something. If they're the CEO of top management whose IQ is, say, 130 or something, the danger is this guy's IQ is 130, but if he thinks his IQ is 160 or 80, that's a no-no. You don't want to do anything with that kind of a company or the person related to your investment, or maybe more than just investment. It's dangerous. And it's much better if you are humble, if your IQ is 110, but you feel that your IQ is 80 or something like that. Then you are much more humble and maybe more careful. And maybe not IQ, EQ, emotional intelligence. Maybe there's a spiritual intelligence there that we can resonate, which is nothing to do with IQ. And I know some cases like that. That's another story. But those are the reference points that I think we should broaden and see what we can learn out of it. Lots of internet information, websites are available. And I keep looking at it, yet also I go back to my root and then trying to synthesize, make sense out of it. So that's the way I would find, as much as I'd like to still see why we do what we do, why I do what I do, and keep learning every step of the way into the future and living in the now, having fun. Thank you. It's a beautiful day in Santa Monica. I make the most of it.